New kid, new school. The double doors loomed, smelling faintly of floor wax and teenage anxiety. Miguel Alcantara adjusted the strap of his backpack, the unfamiliar weight digging into his shoulder. Northwood High. It felt less like a school and more like a fortress designed to keep people like him out. Inside, the hallway was a roaring river of denim and hurried footsteps. He navigated the current, clutching his schedule, the paper crinkling in his damp palm. His English class was a relief, a quiet haven filled with the comforting scent of old books. He devoured Shakespeare, dissecting sonnets with a focus that surprised even him. Math, however, was a different beast. Equations swam before his eyes, mocking his attempts to solve them. He knew he'd catch up, he always did, but the feeling of being behind gnawed at him. The first day assembly was a cacophony. The gymnasium echoed with the squeal of sneakers and the murmur of hundreds of voices. Principal Thompson, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, stood stiffly at the podium. He droned on about school spirit and academic excellence, the usual rhetoric. Then he cleared his throat, a peculiar glint in his eye. And now he announced, his voice booming, we have a special treat. A student new to our halls has graciously agreed to share his talents. He paused, a chuckle rumbling in his chest. Miguel Alcantara, come on up. I hear you're quite the violinist. Let's hear a Filipino serenade. The laughter hit Miguel like a physical blow. It wasn't malicious, not exactly, but it was laced with an ignorance that stung. He felt his cheeks burn, his palms sweating. He wasn't a violinist. He hadn't touched an instrument in years. The last time he'd held his grandfather's violin, it was a somber echo of a life left behind in Manila. He remained rooted to the spot, the laughter swirling around him. Thompson beckoned again, a confused expression on his face. Miguel? Are you shy? Don't be. Show us what you got. Suddenly, Mrs. Davison, the music teacher, stepped forward, her brow furrowed. Principal Thompson, I believe there may be a misunderstanding. Miguel hasn't auditioned for the orchestra. Oh, come on, Davison, Thompson said, waving his hand dismissively. A little cultural sharing never hurt anyone. Besides, it'll be fun. Miguel's mind raced. He could refuse, endure the embarrassment, and be branded a coward. Or he could. Something else. He could try. He hated the idea, the spotlight, the potential for utter failure. But a flicker of defiance ignited within him. This wasn't just about him. It was about the laughter, the assumption, the casual dismissal of his heritage. He stood, his legs feeling like lead. Mrs. Davison, sensing his decision, offered a hesitant smile. We have a spare violin in the music room, she whispered. No pressure, Miguel. Just do what you feel is right. He nodded, the weight of the entire school pressing down on him. As he walked towards the music room, he imagined the ghost of his grandfather, his callous fingers dancing across the strings, urging him on. He didn't know what he was going to do, but he knew he couldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. The dusty discovery. The hallway stretched before Miguel, a dizzying labyrinth of unfamiliar faces and echoing laughter. Each locker slam was a tiny hammer blow against his already frayed nerves. The pressure was a tangible thing, a weight settling on his chest with every passing second. He had to escape. He spotted a door tucked away at the end of the hall, marked only with a faded sign, storage. It was his only option. He slipped inside, the door clicking shut behind him with a satisfyingly muffled thud. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight piercing the gloom. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten things. Stacks of textbooks teetered precariously on shelves, and forgotten sports equipment lay scattered on the floor. It was a mess, but a blessedly quiet one. He sank onto an overturned crate, burying his face in his hands. The principal's words replayed in his head, show them what you're made of, Miguel. This is your chance. But what if he wasn't made of anything special? What if he crumbled under the spotlight? His fingers brushed against something cool and hard beneath the dust coating the crate. He lifted it slightly. Underneath was a long, rectangular case, its leather cracked and worn with age. Curiosity piqued, he wrestled the case onto his lap and unlatched the clasps. The hinges groaned as he opened it, revealing a velvet-lined interior. Nestled inside, wrapped in a faded silk cloth, was a violin. Its wood gleamed softly in the dim light, a warm, honeyed brown. He lifted it carefully, the instrument feeling surprisingly light in his hands. He'd never held a violin before, not really. Just seen them in movies, heard them on the radio. A ballet beside the violin. He picked it up, running his fingers along the taut horsehair. He remembered seeing his grandfather tune the strings of his guitar before serenading his grandmother in the evenings. Imitating what he remembered, Miguel awkwardly placed the violin under his chin, though it cool against his skin. He drew the bow across the strings. The sound that emerged was atrocious. A screeching, discordant wail that made him wince. He tried again and again, each attempt yielding a similar result. Frustration welled up inside him. He was failing at this too. But something about the feel of the instrument, the potential humming within the wood, kept him from giving up. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried again. This time, the sound was still rough, but a little less painful. A tiny spark of hope flickered within him. Maybe, just maybe, he could learn. First struggles, small mercies. The violin case felt heavier each day. It wasn't the weight of the instrument itself, but the burden of expectation. Miguel found a secluded corner of the library tucked between towering shelves of dusty encyclopedias. The air smelled of aged paper and forgotten knowledge. He pulled out the violin, its polished wood gleaming under the dim fluorescent lights. He inhaled deeply, trying to calm the frantic flutter in his chest. His first attempt at a scale produced a sound akin to a strangled cat. He winced. He tried again, focusing on Mr. Garcia's instructions: bow parallel to the bridge, light pressure, listen to the pitch. It was marginally better, but still far from the soaring melodies he envisioned. Practice became a torturous routine. His fingers, clumsy and unaccustomed to the fingerboard, ached. His left shoulder protested with a dull throb. The sounds he produced were more noise than music, a cacophony that seemed to mock his ambition. The other students noticed. Whispers followed him in the hallways, morphing into open laughter in the cafeteria. "Hey, Alcantara," serenading the rats in the library, a voice called out during lunch. Miguel ignored them, his cheeks burning, focusing on his plate of rice and adobo. "Maybe he's training to be a street performer," another voice chimed in, eliciting a fresh wave of laughter. Humiliation gnawed at him. He almost gave up. Almost told Principal Davies that the violin was a mistake, a cruel joke. But then he remembered his grandfather, Lolo Tomas, back in the Philippines. Lolo Tomas, whose calloused hands coaxed soulful melodies from a battered guitar, music that told stories of hardship and resilience, of love and loss. The violin, though foreign in its construction, felt like an extension of that heritage. One afternoon, Mr. Garcia found him slumped in his usual corner of the library, the violin case lying unopened beside him. "Trouble, Miguel?" he asked, his voice gentle. Miguel confessed his struggles, the ridicule, the overwhelming sense of inadequacy. Mr. Garcia listened patiently, his eyes filled with understanding. "Learning an instrument is a journey, not a race," he said finally. "There will be stumbles, setbacks. But don't let the voices of others drown out the music within you. You're Lolo Tomas, he would understand this struggle." He paused, then added, "Come, let's work on that a major scale again. Slowly. We'll find the music together." That day, the strangled cat began to purr. Just a little, but it was enough. A small mercy in a sea of challenges. The virtuoso's shadow. The bow danced across Sarah's strings, a blur of controlled ferocity. The orchestra swelled behind her, a living, breathing entity responding to her every nuance. Tonight was the culmination of years of relentless practice, the concerto practically woven into the fabric of her being. She closed her eyes for a fleeting moment, letting the music wash over her, a wave of pure, unadulterated triumph. The applause, when it came, was deafening. A polite, appreciative roar that she soaked in, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. This was her domain, her spotlight. Backstage, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, she overheard it. A strangled, off-key screech that made her wince. Curiosity, a dangerous emotion for her, propelled her towards the sound. It led her to one of the smaller practice rooms, the door slightly ajar. Inside, a boy, Miguel, she thought his name was, wrestled with a violin. His face was flushed, his brow furrowed in concentration, but the sound he produced was agonizing. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, observing him with a critical eye. His posture was atrocious, his bow hold stiff and unnatural. He looked utterly miserable. After another particularly jarring note, she couldn't help herself. "Are you sure that thing's not broken?" she asked, her voice laced with a thinly veiled sarcasm. Miguel jumped, startled, nearly dropping the violin. He turned, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and embarrassment. He mumbled an apology, his cheeks burning crimson. Sarah pushed herself off the doorframe, stepping into the room. "Look, I'm not trying to be mean," she said, though the lie hung heavy in the air. "But that sound, it's barbaric. Do you even know how to play?" She gestured dismissively at the violin. "Maybe you should stick to something easier." He swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I'm still learning," he stammered. "I only started a few weeks ago." Sarah raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. A few weeks? And you think you can just pick up a violin and expect to sound like Heifetz? Some things take dedication, years of practice. It's not a game. She turned to leave, the sour notes still ringing in her ears. You're wasting your time. As she walked away, she could hear him start again, the same shaky, uncertain sounds filling the hallway. A flicker of something she couldn't quite name, perhaps a sliver of guilt or the prick of a nascent challenge, pierced her satisfaction. But she quickly dismissed it. He wasn't competition. He was just noise. Still, the image of his struggling form, the raw, desperate effort in his eyes, lingered in her mind, a discordant note in her otherwise perfect harmony. Echoes of the past. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight piercing the attic's gloom as Miguel ran his hand along the violin case's worn velvet lining. He'd been avoiding practicing, the pressure of the upcoming concert a heavy stone in his stomach. He just didn't feel connected to the music. As if trying to distract himself, he pressed on a seemingly innocuous section of the case's interior. A click, so faint he almost missed it, echoed in the silence. A hidden compartment. His heart quickened. Inside lay a folded letter, yellowed with age, and a brittle sheet of music, its edges frayed like autumn leaves. The handwriting on the letter was elegant, flowing, almost impossibly neat. He rushed downstairs, violin case clutched in his hand. Mr. Garcia, the school's history teacher and resident Filipino elder, peered at the letter through his thick glasses. This is Tagalog, he said, his voice hushed with reverence. It's very old Tagalog, too. Let me see, he adjusted his glasses, his brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment, he began to translate, his voice a low murmur. My dearest Elisa, I send this with the hope that one day our music will bridge the ocean. The violin sings with the soul of our homeland, a melody of resilience and hope. Play it with pride, my love, and let the echoes of our ancestors guide your bow. Mr. Garcia looked up, his eyes shining. This violin, it belonged to a Filipino immigrant, it seems. A violinist named Rafael. He sent it to his wife, Elisa, who was already here, working as a seamstress. He never made it to America. He died during the war. Miguel felt a lump forming in his throat. He ran his finger over the faded ink of the sheet music. What is this? A kundiman, Mr. Garcia replied softly. A traditional Filipino love song. Full of longing of saudade. Rafael must have transcribed it for Elisa. He paused, a wistful smile playing on his lips. Imagine, Miguel. He sent her his heart note by note across the vast ocean. The pressure in Miguel's chest hadn't lessened, but its composition had shifted. It was no longer just fear, it was also responsibility. A connection to something larger than himself, a lineage stretching back across oceans and generations. He had thought of the violin as a burden, a joke forced upon him. Now it felt like a voice, whispering secrets of resilience and love. He looked at the violin case, no longer as something to be dreaded, but as a vessel of the past. The upcoming concert suddenly felt different. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Rafael and Elisa and all those who had carried their music across the ocean. Practice in the dark. The calluses on Miguel's fingertips throbbed, but he ignored them. The fluorescent hum of the street lamp outside his window bled through the cheap curtains, casting long, skeletal shadows across his bedroom. He drew the bow across the strings, the sound wavering precariously between a mournful cry and a strangled cat. He winced. Progress, he thought, was a stubborn beast. He'd been practicing for hours, fueled by instant coffee and the echoes of Madame Evangeline's story. Her tale of relentless dedication, of transforming despair into art, resonated in a way his textbook definitions of perseverance never could. He imagined her, a wisp of a woman radiating fierce determination, and channeled her spirit into his aching arms. Another scale. Another arpeggio. Each note was a battle, a small victory, hard won. He focused, not on the inadequacy he felt, but on the subtle improvements. The vibrato was less shaky. The transitions smoother. He could almost hear the melody shimmering beneath the hesitant notes. Principal Thompson, a man whose life revolved around predictable schedules and meticulously manicured lawns, found himself drawn to the flickering light emanating from Miguel Alcantara's window. Night after night, the same light. The same faint, sometimes grating, sounds of a violin struggling to life. He stood on the sidewalk, the cool night air clinging to his tweed jacket, and watched. The boy was a silhouette against the glow, his movements dedicated, almost desperate. A pang of something akin to guilt twisted in Thompson's gut. His ill-conceived joke, the violin presentation, it had been a clumsy attempt at, well, he wasn't entirely sure what it had been. Connection? Humor? It had landed with a thud, he knew that much. He recalled the boy's face, the polite smile that hadn't quite reached his eyes. Thompson had chalked it up to shyness, cultural differences. Now, seeing the boy's unwavering commitment, he wondered if he'd mistaken stoicism for acceptance. He ran a hand through his thinning hair, the gesture more weary than usual. The sound of the violin, though still imperfect, had a newfound passion, a raw emotion that resonated even from this distance. Thompson felt a stirring of something he hadn't felt in years, admiration. He turned and walked back towards his house, the perfectly trimmed hedges casting long, imposing shadows. He needed to do something. He wasn't sure what, but the gnawing feeling in his stomach told him that simply observing from the shadows wasn't enough. The streetlight flickered again, momentarily plunging him into darkness. Sabotage? Principal Thompson beamed, adjusting his tie, a nervous habit he couldn't seem to shake. And now for a very special addition to our talent showcase. We're delighted to present Miguel Alcantara, who will be sharing his incredible musical gift with us. He clapped his hands together a little too enthusiastically. Miguel only recently joined us, and I think this will be a wonderful way for him to feel truly welcomed into the Northwood family. A wave of polite applause rippled through the auditorium, followed by a scattering of more genuinely enthusiastic cheers. Miguel, standing awkwardly near the stage entrance, managed a shy smile. Sarah Chen's face, however, remained a mask of carefully controlled neutrality. A flicker of something dark and sharp crossed her features, a shadow of jealousy, perhaps, or something colder, more calculating. She clenched her jaw, the muscle ticking almost imperceptibly. This was her year. Her chance to shine. And now this. Miguel was being handed a spotlight on a silver platter. The bell signaling the end of the school day was Sarah's cue. While Miguel was distracted, accepting congratulations from a small group of well-wishers, Sarah slipped backstage. The backstage area was dimly lit, smelling of dust and stale stage makeup. She spotted Miguel's violin case leaning against a stack of forgotten props. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. She grabbed the case, the worn leather feeling strangely heavy in her hands. Unzipping it with trembling fingers, she lifted the instrument, its varnished wood gleaming under the weak light. The violin felt alien and wrong in her grasp. Her mind raced. She couldn't just outright destroy it. That would be too obvious. Too easily traced back to her. She needed something subtle, something insidious. Her eyes fell on the tuning pegs. One by one, she loosened them, just a fraction, enough to throw the instrument hopelessly out of tune. But that wasn't enough, was it? Not quite devastating enough. With a cruel twist, she carefully wedged a tiny sliver of wood, painstakingly carved from a discarded popsicle stick in the cafeteria, beneath the bridge. It was almost invisible to the naked eye, but it would be enough to subtly dampen the vibrations, to steal the violin's voice, to render Miguel's performance flat. She quickly zipped up the case and placed it back exactly as she found it. Back in the hallway, Sarah spotted Miguel chatting with a few other students. He was smiling, actually smiling. She felt a pang, a momentary twinge of something she couldn't quite identify. But she quickly dismissed it. He was standing in her way. And she would do whatever it took to reclaim her position. A broken string, a new song. The spotlight blazed, an imitation sun hotter than a Manila afternoon. Miguel Alcantara, bathed in its intensity, stood sentinel at center stage, his violin reflecting the harsh glare. A dry swallow did little to ease the rasp in his throat, a stark contrast to the clammy grip he had on his instrument. From the wings, Sarah Chen watched, arms folded, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. He forced himself to ignore her, anchoring his gaze to the Bach sonata perched on the music stand, a safe selection Principal Thompson had decreed, classical and utterly devoid of risk. He raised his bow, its familiar weight a small comfort. The opening chords of the partita in E major resonated through the hall. He closed his eyes, letting the notes envelop him, a fragile bulwark against the unseen audience's judgment. He poured every ounce of himself into the performance, each trill and run a testament to countless hours of dedication, of solitary practice. He neared the apex of the movement, his heart soaring, when snap. A piercing twang shattered the illusion, the high E string unraveling like a frayed nerve. Miguel's bow hung suspended. Panic flared in his chest, constricting his breath. A glance revealed Principal Thompson peering from behind the curtain, face etched with consternation. Sarah Chen, he noted with rising anger, was practically giddy with barely contained glee. His mind reeled. Flight seemed the only option. He could mumble an apology and retreat in shame. Yet something within him steeled, a rebellious spark ignited by years of being overlooked. He slowly lowered the violin, inhaled deeply, and began to play. but not Bach. A different melody bloomed from the wood, a tune his grandmother used to murmur while weaving vibrant tapestries. A Filipino folk song, pulsing with life and color. Again, he closed his eyes, picturing the emerald rice paddies of his homeland, the infectious laughter of children at play. The music unfurled, a poignant narrative woven from threads of longing and cultural pride. His fingers danced deftly across the remaining strings, conjuring a rich, soulful timbre. The auditorium remained hushed, utterly spellbound. The rigid set of Principal Thompson's shoulders perceptibly relaxed. Sarah Chen's smug expression faltered, replaced by a glimmer of something akin to astonishment. As the final note dissipated, a profound silence blanketed the room, broken at last by a solitary clap. Then another and another until the hall erupted in a cacophony of thunderous applause. The audience rose to their feet, cheering and whistling their approval. Miguel blinked against the stage lights, stunned. He saw faces alight with genuine admiration, devoid of pity or mockery. He had transformed a misfortune into a revelation, a song that touched a chord deep within their very beings. Harmony restored. The silence that descended after Miguel's Kalintang performance wasn't empty, it hummed with unspoken awe. A solitary clap broke it, then another and another, until the auditorium exploded in a jubilant roar that surged toward Miguel, an exhilarating current that electrified him from fingertip to scalp. Principal Thompson, his face a blotchy crimson against his tweed, rushed to the microphone. His amplified throat-clearing echoed in the sudden quiet. "Mr. Alcantara," he began, his voice a touch unsteady. That was a revelation. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Frankly, breathtaking. I owe you amends, young man. Sincerely." He met Miguel's gaze directly, the usual frosty detachment replaced by something akin to genuine regret. "My infatuation with the violin blinded me to the beauty of other, equally legitimate, musical traditions. I was insensitive and I profoundly apologize." The applause swelled again, ignited by Thompson's surprising vulnerability. Miguel simply nodded, a subtle, pleased curve to his lips. The vindication was sweet, but the tangible shift in the room, the palpable embrace of the audience, resonated far deeper. Later, as the hall emptied, Sarah Chen approached. Her characteristic swagger had vanished, replaced by an almost shy hesitancy. "Miguel," she murmured, barely audible above the departing crowd's murmur. "That was astonishing. I never knew." She paused, chewing on her lip in a rare display of uncertainty. "I was awful. I'm truly sorry for being so competitive. And insufferable." Miguel regarded her, surprised by the earnestness in her expression. He offered his hand. "Apology accepted, Sarah. It's fine. We all stumble." Her handshake was firm, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "So, friends." "Friends," Miguel agreed, the word a buoyant whisper. The following day, Principal Thompson's summons felt less like an impending doom. Seated behind his imposing oak desk, Thompson appeared almost diffident. "Mr. Alcantara," he began, leaning forward slightly. "About the orchestra, a position has become available in the percussion section. I understand your expertise is considerable." A thrill surged through Miguel. "Yes, sir. It is." Thompson's smile was genuine, transforming his stern features. "Excellent. We would be honored to have you. Rehearsals are Monday and Wednesday evenings. Please consider this your formal invitation." Stepping out of the office, Miguel felt a lightness he hadn't known since leaving the Philippines. The discordant note had vanished, replaced by a symphony of acceptance, belonging, and the promise of a harmonious future. He was home. He was embraced. He was finally, undeniably, part of Northwood High.